Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Okay, welcome back to this edition of the Live from the Heartland show. This is Michael James. We are recording on the 19th of April. The show is for the week of April 22nd. And like I said at the top of the hour, we're going to catch up with some old friends today. And one of them is Orrin Williams. And we met a long time ago, back in the 60s, but I've got to know him while we had the Heartland Cafe. And the way I had grown up working on some farms. There were farms in my town down the road. Our family had gardens. I was in the 4-H club, and I've always been interested in kind of urban agriculture. When we started the Heartland Cafe, we had read Francis Lapay Moore about how we feed the planet. And this guy, Orrin Williams, shows up, and he is a football coach at that time at Northeastern Illinois. That piqued my interest, and we got to know him, and we've run into each other every once in a while. Back in 2010, he was on this show for a long time, and you can get that at YouTube. So that's enough talking. Let's say hello to Orrin. How are you, brother?
I'm good, Mike. How are you, my brother?
Good. Did I leave anything out about?
Nah, if you try to get everything in, you take up the whole show. So,
well, we're going to talk a little bit about agriculture and stuff, but I've always considered myself an organizer, and I know you're an organizer. And one of the things I like to do on the show, which I do in my class at DePaul, is share people's life as an organizer, how they got into being an organizer, where they come from. So tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into some deep detail on growing vegetables in Chicago.
All right. Well, I think I passed across, like you said, back in the 60s. And at one point, late 60s until 1970 or so, when I wound up going in the Air Force, I was the chairman of the Black Student Union at Wright College, and had the pleasure to bring in folks like Fred Hampton Sr. and Cha-Cha and that whole crew for an event that we did, and got to exchange ideas with those folks back in those days. So that got me interested, and of course went in the military, and that was an interesting part of my life. You talk about love, hate, I wasn't the greatest soldier in the world, as you can imagine, but I did get to go to Thailand, where I spent almost 2 years, and kind of blew my mind open, right, about what the world was like and who was in it, and, rice paddies and people farming and water buffaloes and all that stuff, right? Southside kid from Chicago, thinking everything in Asia is Chinese, right? And everybody eats Chinese food, only to find out completely, utterly false, untrue. The world is a complicated place. And one experience that I had while I was there that I haven't talked to many people about, but we used to get this paper on the base called Stars and Stripes. It was for, the military guys. But during that time, we got this particular issue. In Thailand, there was serious riots and disorder because of the rice prices going up, right? And there was a contrived rice shortage. And the Stars and Stripes had an article in it about how Thailand had its biggest, best bumper crop ever. So you can see how they contrived a shortage while exporting as much rice as they could and making as much money as they could, right? And then also just being in that milieu and watching how people operate in the world and how they fed themselves, that stuck with me. Then when I was at Northeastern, I coached football, but also ran the recreation and intramural sports program. But in a space like Northeastern, really intimate campus, you knew everybody, had a lot of great conversations with folks. But also, I grew up in Inglewood, 300 block west of 60th Place. And so if you go there now, there are no houses left on the side of the street I live on. There may be 5 or 6 houses left from the time I grew up. There was no vacant lots on our block. But that got me interested in, so why do we have this vacant land? What can we do? And I thought a great idea would be to grow food, but I didn't know anything about soil contamination or soil quality or any of that stuff. I just thought it was a good idea and a good way to use land. And, having a great grandmother, at least, that lived in Pensacola, Florida, which is kind of a city, it's not the biggest city anywhere, but she had chickens and she grew stuff. And, so all of that came together for me. But for the long time, I was the crazy uncle in the attic, right? What do you mean, grow food and, in Chicago in a vacant lot? So now, pushing forward to now, we have a proof of concept. We know we can do this. There's great organizations, there's Growing Home, who I worked for a few years. There's Urban Growers Collective, operated by Will Allen's daughter. And Will had Growing Power up in Milwaukee. You've got Sweetwater Foundation. You've got a number of folks doing stuff here in the city and doing great stuff. But for me now, the real challenge is to create eaters, right? We have a population that is rooted in a food system and in a food environment that's controlled by corporations. And so we have people who are addicted, if you will, to fast food and Uber Eats and all that stuff, right? We don't have any Heartlands left, right? We've got Majani here on the South Side. We got a couple of other restaurants that do good stuff. And Chef Sadakia at Majani, I know he does a lot in terms of buying his produce from local farmers and that kind of stuff. But few people cook, mostly elders cook. And we see the results of what's happened. What is it? 88% of us have at least one metabolic disorder. So only 12%
of all people?
The population in this country, right? Only 12% of us are metabolically healthy. And so a lot of that, you can look at diet and what we eat and how we eat has a huge impact on that number. Of course, there's other things I won't get into now, but my thing now is getting people to eat fruits and vegetables again, getting people to think about what they drink, think about what they eat, think about how they can participate again in eating and drinking, in a healthier way. I won't even try to describe what's a healthy diet or any of that, but that's my main goal. And the other projects that I'm working on now, I work with Chicago Grows Food, which is a coalition of groups that include like Gardeneers, Stein Learning Garden in St. Sabina. I don't want to leave anybody out. Howard Rosing at DePaul, Saria Lofton at UIC, different organizations, different folks. And so we've done a lot with fabric grow bags and trying to get people interested in and teaching them about the possibilities for home gardening. So we really want to dive into that space. And last year we installed about 50 home gardens. And this year we are on the path to do that again. We have other organizations like Grow Greater Inglewood, which are also doing home backyard projects. They mostly install raised beds, but we use the fabric grow bag as the framework for our programs.
Say that again. What do you call this bag? The fabric
grow bag. And they come in sizes between 1 gallon up to 200 gallons, right? So our default size is a 5-gallon grow bag. and you can grow a lot of stuff. I mean, I
But
have,
before we go into all that, let me ask a couple of things. So you're the executive director of the Center for Urban Transformation in Chicago.
correct.
And that, what led you to that job? The last thing you were doing when you were at Northeastern, you were running the intramural program, you were doing some coaching. What got you into the agriculture? And then what does the Center for Urban Transformation do exactly in promoting backyard garden growing?
Well, I mean, for me, it's just the work we do. Whether I'm at UIC doing my job there or the Center for Urban, it's all one thing to me.
All right, so you have a whole network now of people who are really working on urban gardening.
Yeah, yeah,
And you
and
can
we
see it
still
when you drive around
interface.
town. You can see some of these sometimes lots and a lot of planting going on. Talk a little more about that. That sounds like a great projects.
No, I mean, it's in its infancy. We also, with our Chicago's food partners, because of the pandemic, we created a curriculum at UIC with Marjorie Kirsten, who was at the Y at that time, and now she's a PhD candidate at UIC. And we created a curriculum about how to grow using the grow bags.
Has the city been involved in any way? Are they helpful? Do you get some empty lots? Is there any money? What
No,
what
but
are your demands for our new mayor?
well, I mean, to be supportive, particularly of the urban gardening community, making sure they get water, making sure they get the support that they need, making sure that they have a right to entry for different sites, making sure they get assistance in cleaning up and decontaminating sites and all that stuff. That would be a great boon. Of course, supporting community gardeners as well, and connecting with entities like Neighbor Space to make sure that community gardens can get the fencing they need, making sure that they can get water access on their lots. I mean, all that kind of stuff is vital. And also, these politicians get caught up in all kinds of stuff. I'm not quite sure what they think or what they know about what's going on in the world, but we have to make sure that we have food access that's nearby. In terms of Illinois, in terms of the city, in terms of right out our back door.
What's the situation? What's the situation with access to food? We hear about food deserts. We hear like Walmart's closing 3 stores, more than 3, but 3 in what they call underserved neighborhoods, or we do, poor neighborhood in the hood. What's the status of that? We had Whole Foods for a while, I think on the south side or the west side, and then it closed up. Are there any good news things on big companies and providing food in neighborhoods, or are we really at ground zero here?
We're at ground zero. We always were, right? And the things like Whole Foods in Inglewood, that was a one-off. It's not something. I mean, I supported the people in the community that wanted to do it, the people that worked on the project, but I never thought it was a good idea. I thought that the site that store occupied, number one on my list would have been a Black-owned grocer. And if we couldn't do that, I was interested in a locally owned entity like Pete's Fresh Market or whatever the case may be. That didn't happen. We've seen this process, and now the community is unhappy with the replacement of Whole Foods. There was a lot that I didn't like about the site. It wasn't really big enough. So it was a miniature version of Whole Foods, if you will. There's nothing wrong with that necessarily, but I knew that it probably was not going to be something that was a long-term solution. We have worked with Inner City Muslim Action Network, and there's the Go Green on Racine, little grocery store there on 63rd. and Racine. So one of the things we like to see happen is more a greater return to what I call community and neighborhood sized grocers. You and I are old enough to remember when you had the A&P or you had the Jewel, and essentially it was a little bigger storefront than the corner store, but it was walkable. You could walk to 59th Street in the A&P. And then on that corner of 59th and Wentworth, when I was growing up, you had the people that sold live poetry. So your mom would send you to get a chicken, and then you'd go to the A&P to get some celery or whatever else the case may be. I'd like to see a return to that, but the corporations have colonized the space, if you will.
Orrin, one of the things you brought up was getting people to eat better. And, I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat a lot of chicken. I do a lot of oatmeal, et cetera, et cetera. But, I do have a taste for the sweet and the fast food and all that, and have been very good at resisting them. But how do you, as someone who is a proponent of people eating good and not only eating well, but growing their food, how do we make steps to get kids to like food better? I know there's some efforts in schools to provide better food and all that. It seems like a big battle, though.
Well, it is. Battle. It is. But, that's what I love about working at USN, Chicago Partnership for Health Promotion, which is a program out of the Office of Community Engagement, Neighborhood Health Partnerships. So that's what our team does. In fact, we've got interventions that include schools, that include pre-K, daycare folks, that includes working with corner stores, that includes working with pantries and doing all of this work. So that's what it's really about. My team, I have a 2-person team, it's 3 of us, but Miriam Verto, who teaches classes like Cooking Matters and Veggie RX, which is a prescription program for people that have been diagnosed with a metabolic disorder like diabetes. And so she works with clinics like with Inner City Muslim Action Network, and she goes in and she teaches people how to cook and how to use the produce that is available with the prescription box that they get. So she does programs on Facebook Live. She shows up in these different communities and in clinics to teach people how to cook. And then I have Tracy Williams, who started recently, but she's certified yoga instructor. She will be teaching along with Miriam Cooking Matters, those kinds of things. This year we'll be working a lot with the farm stands, like at Urban Growers Collective and at Growing Home. And so our teams will show up and they do cooking demos and they do nutrition classes and they do all that stuff. And that's also what we're doing with the home garden stuff. So we actually want to take it to the block, as we say, and our team will come in to the home garden. We just ask you to have your neighbors come, your grandma come, your auntie come, whatever the case may be, and we'll spend some time with you and we'll do nutrition classes and we'll do cooking demos and we'll do all that kind of stuff. So that's our kind of contribution to it. And there's other organizations, of course, that do a lot of good work with respect to that as well.
Orrin, do you see an expansion of these community gardens over the last few years? Are there more? Is it really starting to happen?
Oh, yeah, it really is. People are getting, more exposure to them. People are beginning to realize the importance of them. School gardens are expanding. I mean, all of that. So you've got Michelle Newman Brooks with CPS and her team. And so there's a big expansion of school gardens, and all of us work together too, which is gratifying.
Well, this is good. You and I talked about getting together a little bit and giving me some advice on my own backyard, as well as driving around the city and looking at some of your projects. So we're going to do that.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you. You want to give people a way they can get a hold of you if they want to explore some of this a little further with you? Got an email or something?
Oh yeah, it's ORRINW at UIC.edu. ORRINW, Orrin W at UIC.edu.
Well, you're a hell of a guy, and I'm really glad that we got to check in with each other, and we both have said we're going to get together, so let's do it.
Yeah, you know, the weather's getting warm, man. Come on out.
Right on. Okay,
All right.
brother, keep doing good in the world.
You too, Mike. Appreciate everything you've done and that you're continuing to do.
All right, thank you.
See you soon.
Everybody else, stay tuned for more Live from the Heartland. We'll be back with Jamie O'Reilly in just a minute. And once again, thank you, Orrin Williams. Hasta luego, buena suerte. Eat well.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
All right.